A lot of folks really emphasize the GRE as like the most important part of their application process. It's not.
So as far as deciding what your GRE, the role it's going to play in your admission to your selected program, first step is to know where you're applying. Every single program is going to differ in its requirements, and sometimes they even change those requirements year by year. So you want to make sure to double check their most recent up-to-date requirement for that program, for each program you're applying to. Basic questions you want to know for sure are how they're going to receive their scores, when they need them by. There are still some schools that want a physical copy of your score, by the way, but most will take a digital one. When they're going to need them by, and of course, what areas of that exam are they focusing on? Another question you want to know are, what are the average scores for admitted students? I really recommend speaking to a real person if you can. That means calling the department, asking to speak to the person who coordinates admissions. They usually go by a different name within each program. You most likely do not speak to faculty or professors about these topics because they don't handle this portion of admittance, right? They're more so someone you would work with for your research. Another tip I would recommend is that current graduate students are a wealth of information. So if you could consider reaching out to a current graduate student within the department, such as sending a friendly, informal email and asking them, what have GRE scores been like for admitted students in the.
All right, I'm going to jump back in to take over real quick. So what V is saying is that while we don't want to reach out to faculty when you're asking questions, you do want to try to speak to folks who are working in admissions or other graduate students. So V was saying that a question that might be worth asking is maybe, what were your GRE scores, or what are GRE scores of other folks that you know were admitted? This is also information that you can often find online. Often sources like the World Report, information on different schools can help you figure out what those average scores were and help you prepare that information as you're going into your program.
That was really it. But I would just like to emphasize, don't be afraid to ask these questions and to speak to a real person and to get that confirmation, especially if you know that this can really impact your funding. You want to be very clear on this before you apply, so that you know how to develop a strategy that is in accordance with each program. Yeah, thank you, Erica.
Yeah, no worries. And while we're getting to that next slide, so this is a process, like you mentioned, to start before you do the application process. So do all of your research online, call folks, really dig in there. But I also really want to emphasize, this is a process you should do before you're taking your GRE, before you're studying. A lot of folks really emphasize the GRE as like the most important part of their application process. And one, it's not. And two, the way you approach it is really going to depend on this information gathering stage. So where you're gathering information about your programs, but also about yourself. So when you're going into your study, the way you're approaching your GRE study, and again, the rest of your application, is really going to depend on where you're starting and what you're looking to do. So once you've gathered that information about your schools, gather information about yourself personally. So the first thing that I recommend doing for the GRE in any timeline, if you're taking the GRE, is to take an official practice test, full length, one sitting, as realistic as possible. And what that's going to do is it's going to kind of be a diagnostic. It's going to give you a baseline GRE score. So that tells you where you're starting. Now you can maybe start to see how when we have that extra information about what are average scores for admitted students or what are requirements for your program, when you need those by, we can start to kind of build out a plan. In addition to this, a really important piece of information to know is how much time can you realistically commit to studying each week leading up to when you need your scores by. Now, for different students, this is going to depend. So if you are currently a full-time student or employed full-time, likely the amount of time that you're going to be studying per week is going to be smaller than the amount of time someone who is maybe working part-time or going to school part-time or not working or in school is going to be able to study. So try to be, again, really realistic here. Can I spend 5 hours a week? Can I spend 10 hours a week? If you're going above that, I would assume you're in maybe a spot where you're not going to school or working full time. So get your baseline GRE score, figure out how much time you can realistically commit to studying each week. Then, okay, now you've got your information about your programs, you've got your information about yourself. Start putting it together to refine your plan. So, all right, let's say I'm starting at X score and I've got Y weeks until I want to get to Z score. All right, maybe that is the average score for admitted students, or maybe that is the 75th percentile score for admitted students. All right, or maybe it's just the baseline to be considered, again, depending on your plan. At this point, you want to go, can I achieve that realistically in the time that I have? And again, realistically is the important word here. I see a lot of students who are really expecting to do kind of bananas things in a really short period of time. We want to be realistic at this phase because, again, we're very, very early. So we go, can I do this? If not, we want to reassess. Maybe this is not the right time to be applying, or maybe this is not the right program to be applying to, or maybe it's a good time to be reaching out about what are options if my score is lower? What can I do with my application if my score is maybe not where I would want it to be for that application? So get that kind of set expectation early. Now, if you're going, yes, I can achieve the score I'm looking for, then think about how competitive is your score going to be. Are you at that baseline? Are you at average? Are you at 75th percentile? Are you higher? And then once you have that information, you can kind of determine what else am I going to need to do in other parts of my application to shine. And we, again, might start thinking about our plan a little bit differently. Regardless of what situation you find yourself in, it's important to have that early on so you can plan. I think a lot of students think kind of unrealistically, like they're going to get the best GRE score in 3 weeks. That's probably not realistic. Make your plan according to reality. All right. Then also, if you're, say, going into a humanities program, that you might want to emphasize verbal. Okay, so then you can look at your scores and go, all right, if I'm looking just at the verbal section, what do I need to do? Maybe within the verbal section, are we thinking that this is going to be a challenge primarily with reading comprehension questions? Were those the questions you struggled with most in your practice test? Or maybe did you struggle more with text completion or sentence equivalence? Try to figure those things out early. So using what you know about your program and from your practice test, figure out what am I going to focus on? What am I going to prioritize in my study as I lead up to my test date?